Dear students, this video lecture has been designed to broaden the horizons of your knowledge regarding Indian foreign policy. This topic holds a great relevance in the present context and also constitutes a part of syllabi of BA 4th semester and MA 4th semester. So it is bound to be beneficial for the students of political science. The content of my lecture focuses on two key areas, namely the meaning of foreign policy and determinants of Indian foreign policy. I have made an effort to clarify these sectors in simple terms so that listeners may be able to grasp the content. At the onset, I would like to introduce the concept by explaining the rationale behind this policy. It is a matter of common knowledge that in the modern world, no nation can exist in isolation. In order to fulfill its needs and interests, it has to establish social, political, economic, cultural, and diplomatic relations with other nations. The policy adopted by a nation to conduct its relations with other countries is called foreign policy. In other words, foreign policy is a set of principles that lay out a plan of action for diplomatic dealings with other nations, international bodies, and regional groupings. Rathnaswamy has given an apt definition of foreign policy as a bundle of principles and practices that regulate the intercourse of a state with other state. Now we move on to the second part of the lecture, which is related to the determinants of Indian foreign policy, all the factors instrumental in shaping the foreign policy of India. Actually, foreign policy is not determined by any single element. Rather, it is affected by a collection of factors which may broadly be classified into two groups: domestic factors and international factors. Among the significant domestic factors, the first is geography. The foreign policy is greatly influenced by the geographical situation of a nation. As for instance, in case of India, the geographical positioning is such that the northern frontiers touch Nepal and China. In west are Pakistan and Afghanistan. In the east is Bangladesh and Myanmar. And in the south lies Sri Lanka. So it becomes essential for the progress of the country to establish good relations with these immediate neighbors. Besides this, geographically, India is also surrounded by Indian Ocean, in which the naval forces of America and Britain command great influence. So India cannot afford enmity with these powers for the sake of guarding its trade interests. The second factor is historical factor, which implies that it has been a historical tradition of India to support peace and never violate the integrity of any country. This sentiment reflects itself in our foreign policy as well, which supports world peace and security. The third factor which was taken into account while framing the foreign policy of India was the economic condition of the country. After independence, Indian economy was in a bad shape, and India needed help from Western countries to fulfill its basic necessities. Financial aid and technical know-how was urgently required for industrial development. So, India decided to maintain friendly relations with both power blocs to improve its economic setup. The fourth factor that influenced the foreign policy of India was military factor. India was militarily very weak when it gained freedom. It needed military aid from both blocs and so decided to opt for non-alignment. However, it had to tilt away from this policy at times depending upon the attitude of America and its soft corner for Pakistan. The fifth vital factor which shapes foreign policy is the national interest. In fact, the roots of foreign policy lie in national interest, and it has to be molded from time to time, keeping in view the changing interests of the nation. Sixthly, the Indian foreign policy was greatly influenced by ideologies like Western liberalism, Marxism, and Gandhism. As the main architect of this policy, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru was deeply under the impact of these ideologies. The personal thinking of Prime Minister Nehru was a decisive factor of foreign policy of India. He advocated opposition to imperialism, colonialism, fascism, racism, emphasized on non-alignment and peaceful coexistence as he himself believed in these principles. The ideals of Indian freedom movement and the courage which it inculcated in the leading lights of the nation also made us adopt a foreign policy based on the idea of not becoming a stooge of big powers. Lastly, the directives regarding foreign policy mentioned in Part 4, Article 51 of the Constitution also guided our policy makers. This article provides that the state shall try to encourage international peace and security. The state will maintain healthy and cordial relations with other countries. The state will promote honor for international law, treaties and settlements. The state will encourage the settlement of international disputes. So all these four principles in fact form the bedrock of Indian foreign policy. Now, besides the domestic factors, various international factors have also been instrumental in framing the foreign policy of India. The first major international factor was the existence of two power blocs, Anglo-American bloc and Soviet bloc on the world scene. When India became independent, it decided not to join any bloc and remain aloof from power politics for the sake of peace. So in our foreign policy, it was mentioned that we will remain equidistant from both and establish friendly ties with them by moving on the path of non-alignment. Secondly, the Cold War was going on between the two power blocs due to ideological differences, and India did not want to be a part of it. This state of affairs at international level made us opt for non-alignment. Thirdly, India was aware that foreign powers could jeopardize the internal peace of India and create hurdles in its progress with the help of its neighboring countries. Therefore, India made maintenance of friendly relations with neighbors a basic tenet of its foreign policy. Fourthly, the British government had set up an organization called Commonwealth of Nations, in which countries who had remained under British rule were included. India also joined this organization to get assistance and cooperation from other member countries. Fifthly, India observed that several nations of Asia and Africa had also suffered similar fate due to foreign domination. So it expressed its commitment to support freedom movements in these countries in its foreign policy. And lastly, the establishment of UNO was greatly appreciated by India, and it expressed its faith in the UN objectives of maintaining world peace in its foreign policy. So, dear students, I hope that this lecture must have enabled you to comprehend what foreign policy is and which factors determine the principles enshrined in the Indian Constitution. And I would like to now tell you that because of these factors, the basic principles of Indian foreign policy have been listed as follows: protection of national interest, faith in Panchsheel, world peace and security, membership of Commonwealth, ending of imperialism and colonialism, friendly relations with all, end of racial discrimination, respect for human rights, close relations with Asian and African countries, strengthening of UNO, opposition to military alliances and support to disarmament, policy of non-alignment, promotion of peaceful coexistence, peaceful use of atomic energy, new international economic order and protection of environment, and opposition to terrorism. So thank you, dear students, for a patient hearing, and I hope that this lecture would prove to be very helpful for you to study the foreign policy of India. Thank you.